But if something's wrong with the design, we'll fix it in a future release. Let's just get it out there and we'll fix it later. I mean, maybe we'll get feedback from the customers, right? That's my favorite thing. Oh, let's put it out and see what the customers say. Okay, so what mechanisms will we actually use to see what the customers say? But we haven't thought about that yet. Okay. So you're not really serious about doing that. So that's before the tipping point. After the tipping point, they're still focused on the business. They're still making sure that any given product meets the business needs. They're still making sure that any given product meets the technology needs. But now, if it is not meeting the design needs, they don't ship it. Right? The product does not get shipped because it does not meet the definition of a good design, whatever that is. And to get to that point, you have to clearly talk about what a good design is and what your minimum for good design is. When that's not a criteria, anything can be the minimum for good design, which is why Microsoft still exists. But when you you don't have Microsoft listeners, do you?
No, I'm sure I don't.
uh, uh, when you have this notion of minimum quality, you have something that minimum design quality, right? You have to talk about it. You have to be able to express it. You have to be able to instrument it and say, okay, on Thursday, we got it from not good enough to good enough. And we're ready to ship now. And so you have to have all that in place. And that changes the culture. That changes the way you think.
Hey everybody, it's Kathy Bosco from Rethink.fm, the forward-thinking podcast about experience design. Join me and special guests to discuss effective design, technology, and the intersection of helping people and entrepreneurship. From user experience research to product roadmaps, we've got you covered. We've all got questions, so let's get started. I'm very excited about our special guest, Jared Spool, joining us today. You may know him from his transformational work over time, helping us all to improve our collective UX expertise across our industry, in our organizations, at our teams, and individually lifting us up in our careers. Today, we're going to roll up our sleeves and talk about the work that teams do to transform experiences for people. If you care about eliminating all bad design in the world, you'll want to join the community over at Leaders of Awesomeness. You can find it at leaders.centercenter.com. It's a lively community of UX leaders, designers, researchers, and writers from all over the world. Let's get started. Well, thank you for joining me today, Jared. It is a real treat to get one-on-one time with you. How are you feeling today? Ready to talk shop?
Sure, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. I'm honored that you wanted to talk to me.
Let's just dive right into this work. It's really important work. It's really meaningful work and something that we both share a passion for. Full disclosure, I've participated in a lot of your courses over the course of my career, and they've been absolute game changers for me and for my teams. And so I am a little bit biased, but I'm really anxious to share some of your resources and insights. So let's just kick it off with a tough question. When you go into organizations and you immerse yourself within that organization to help improve their UX playbook, where do you even start? What's your path for entry there?
Well, I usually start in the lobby because they don't let me in the other doors. The way that we start is by trying to understand why we were there. One of the things I've come to learn is there's meaning in why they've decided to focus on this now, right? So one of the first questions I ask is, why are we doing this now? Why didn't we do this 6 months ago? And why aren't we doing this 6 months from now? Why is now the important time to have this conversation? And almost always, that is an illuminating question, because it signals that something has changed and reached a level of urgency. And when you can sort of get your handle on what is making this the most important thing to do at this moment, um, it changes the way that people approach it. If they don't have an answer, if they're like, I don't know, I guess we could wait, then that to me is a signal that if it gets difficult, they're gonna drop out, or they're gonna ghost you or something. I mean, it's just gonna
Red flag.
you're gonna run. So in order for change to happen, there has to be urgency. Change is always hard. And the minute you get any resistance, you have to have motivation to get past the resistance. So that's the thing that I am sort of keenly looking for, is how much motivation do they have to get past the resistance? Because it's a waste of everybody's time if we start something and never finish it.
That's right. That's right. Do you find that, I'll say I find that often people recognize the competitive advantage high quality user experience can be. A lot of markets are getting really saturated with competition, and that's a real winning business goal as well. I'm not sure that's the best motivation, but it can help bring a team up a level if you can get in the door that way, if no other way is available.
I think it's a key motivation. I think it's a team that gets why experience is important to them is going to be way easier to work with than a team that is like, why are we doing this again? So it's and I think you're absolutely right. There are two ways to compete. One is that you just have the lowest cost product on the market, right? And not the lowest price product, but the one that costs you the least to deliver. And if your costs to deliver your product, the cost to make it, the cost to put it out there, the cost to support it, if those costs are lower than everybody else's costs, then you can keep lowering your price to the point where your price is lower than your competitor's cost. And that means to match your price, they have to sell at a loss, but you're still making a profit. So that's an ideal place to be, but only one organization can be there at a time.
It's true.
So the other way to compete is on having some quality that is better than anybody else's quality. And that quality can be reliability, that quality can be aesthetics, that quality can be maintainability, it can be efficiency, speed, performance, or it can be the overall experience. And if you deliver a better experience than everybody else, you can charge more for those people who are willing to pay for a better experience. And this is why Apple makes more money in like 10 times as much money as Samsung in phones, and sells 1/10 the number, or 1/100th the number of phones every year, because Apple is selling on quality, and they can charge $1,000 for a phone, and Samsung can't get away with that.
Yeah, I love how you define quality. I know it's a well-researched trifecta of things. I believe it's pleasure, flow and meaning are ways to calculate the quality
Well,
of experience.
that's the sort of core elements of delight, right?
Delight, right.
Danish has now came up with those sort of three levers of delight. The interesting thing about that is that it's a way to think about why people are excited to engage with your product or service over somebody else's. If there's no real difference, if I can use this service, I can use that service, it doesn't make a difference to me, then that's
You're going
fine.
for price. You're just going to go for the cheapest one.
Exactly. I mean, why would I pay more money to get something that's the same as something I would get that's less money?
That's right. Well, my husband's a painting contractor. I mean, he's a brilliant sculpture scholar fella too, but by trade, he's a painting contractor. And he does really high quality work. He's very experienced. He's a little more expensive, but you're going to get that higher quality experience or higher quality outcome working with him. He's going to keep paint off an awful lot of stuff as well, Yeah.
I mean, the quality, the experiential quality has a lot of pieces to it, right? It's a thoughtfulness and a consideration, and the fact that somebody sat down and thought about that makes it a more delightful experience. And you don't think about the paint splatter, but until you're dealing with it. And there's little white dots over everything in the room because someone didn't do the work they should have done to take care of that so that there wasn't any splatter. And that's just, experience and thoughtfulness and a real understanding as to what makes a difference.
Yeah, I think also going into organizations, when I have myself gone into organizations to help on aspects or projects or teams, I've found that it's really true that there are leaders that are not in the leadership role, that are leading from bottom up. And I think it goes back to what you're saying about just caring about the work you do, the people you work with, and having that sort of thoughtful caring in your work, no matter what your job title is a real way to lead from the bottom up. So I appreciate the discussion points that come up often in your courses around leadership. And I can tell you it's really made someone who was a little insecure as a younger designer embrace leadership and be able to do it thinking of it that way, that it's not just a job title, it's a way of working and caring.
Right. There's a lot of confusion around the idea that of who a leader is and who a manager is, and people use those terms interchangeably. It's like, well, the leader of my group, and they're referring to a manager, or they refer to the executive team as the corporate leadership, or we have to go to the leadership on this. I've seen people use the acronym ELT to refer to the executive leadership team. And I wonder how many people on the executive team are actually leaders versus managers. There's a distinction between the two. A manager is appointed by the organization. A manager has directs, and a manager's job is to make sure that the direct reports are have everything they need to do their best work. They understand what's expected of them. They understand how their work fits into the mission. They have all the resources, materials, equipment to do the job they're supposed to do, so that that's not getting in the way. They understand how their opinion matters. They understand how the work they do fits into their long-term career goals so that they stay motivated to do a good job because they see the reward from that. So they see all these things that make a difference in their life. And this is what a manager brings, is all of this goodness, is making sure all that happens. A leader doesn't do any of that. A leader doesn't need to be appointed by the organization. The only thing you need to be a leader is a follower. And the way you get a follower is you have some sort of compelling vision that makes that makes people want to join in. And the job of a leader is to push the vision forward. It's not to make sure everybody has what they need. Of course, it's a good thing to help make sure everybody has what they need. But that's what
if you can do it all.
if you can do it. But that's
Yeah.
what a manager does. That's not what a leader does. And sometimes there are managers who are also leaders, and there are leaders who are also managers. But many times they're not. And in fact, we see this frequently at the tops of organizations, where you'll often have a CEO, which is the person who has the vision, and they go around making sure everybody understands what the vision is and make sure everybody's on the same page of the vision. And then you have a COO, a chief operating officer, whose job it is to actually make sure everybody has what they need to execute the vision. And when Steve Jobs was at Apple, Tim Cook was the COO, and he was very good at that. He was a very good manager. But Steve had the vision. By all reports, Steve was a horrible manager. People didn't like working for him. They were scared completely of him. But they loved his vision, and that's what kept them there.
Right. Yeah, it's very, very inspiring to work with a leader that has the ability to articulate the vision and strategy well too, because if you can't really articulate that well, you might as well not have one.
Right. I mean, all a vision is a narrative story. It's this is going to happen, and we're going to do this and this and this and then this and then this, right? It's just a series of narrative steps. And there are different types of vision, right? There's just sort of an overall vision and of where we see ourselves a few years from now, and then we have what we call an experience vision, which is a vision of what the experience will be like. Here's what the experience is today for our customers, but here's what we want it to be 5 years from now. And the more detail you can put into that story, the more people can connect with it. And that's what makes it.
And having it as a narrative makes it very much more memorable for people.
Right.
I mean, it's just it's not just word soup. It's a narrative. It's visual, perhaps. It's a story. It's a storyboard. It's a recording. It's proprietary. So these are things you don't really get to see very often unless you're a member of that organization. I would love to see like a archive of all the envisionment stories of all kinds of organizations. I think that would be so fascinating to get to look through a couple dozen of those or something. That would be very interesting experiment.
Yeah. You can see some of them in some of the older companies. For instance, the Disney companies have released a lot of Walt's original vision stuff, and it's really fascinating.
Oh, I'll look for links and put them in the show notes for us.
Yeah.
Great. I think another thing that I really enjoy about being a UX designer, UX researcher, is that perspective that we get as the designer or the design team of the end-to-end experience of a customer lifecycle through product, for example. We're involved with every aspect of the customer or prospective customer's experience through their entire life cycle with a product. And that is a powerful, but a lot of responsibility in that role. So lots of communication, lots of journey mapping, and facilitating a shared understanding and a shared language about what that experience is like. And I don't think other teams in an org have that same purview as much.
No, it's in many organizations, one of the phenomena that you see is that when the organization is very, very small, like, 3 people big type organization, right? That small. They are very in tune with who their customers and their users are, because that's how they survive on a day-to-day basis, right? They don't have that many customers, and if one of them decides that this product sucks, then they have to fix it or they go out of business, right? So they're very in tune with that. But as a organization grows, and more people come in, understanding what the customer's needs gets delegated. Customer support people, salespeople, there's a whole bunch of people who are on the front lines who this gets delegated to. But the people who make the biggest decisions in the organization, what products are we going to build, what deadlines are we going to build them on, what staffing are we going to do, what organizations are we going to partner with or merge with or acquire, those are the biggest decisions an organization makes. And what users need fall off of that decision-making process, because those people are no longer connected to the users. They're no longer connected that closely to the customers, except for the biggest customers. And
right. The biggest voices, right?
Exactly. So most customers get sort of pushed to the side, and they're not in consideration for these big things. And when you do that, when you no longer are connected to the customers, you're no longer connected to the users, you can't possibly make decisions based on how it'll deliver a better experience. And how many products or services have you used after the company that offers them had merged with another company, and they have these two things that are both their products, but it feels like they were never designed to work together. It feels like they're two separate companies because the merger never did take the user experience into account, and so they still feel separate. And it's like these two parts of the company offer the same product, and they're sort of competing against each other. And why would I buy one over another one? And it's very confusing, and that actually hurts the business.
It also hurts the organization's sense of having an understanding of the meaningful nature of their work. I work with a lot of engineers who care very much about staying closely connected to an understanding of that their work makes a difference to another human being. And that quality of work-life experience and the meaningful nature of their work and solving problems for people is what makes them passionate about what they do. And as companies grow, like you said, that you get pulled further and further from the meaningful nature of the work too. And I mean, I learned that from you, and I've carried that with me to every team I've ever worked on. And it's helped me be persuasive in bringing human-centered experiences to organizations, because the engineering teams on board, they like exposing their work to customers. It improves the quality. They don't have to redo things as much. Like they love it. But it's not always, it sometimes gets overlooked in the hustle and the rifts and all of the churn and effort it takes to run a big ship like a large organization.
Right. And that happens quite a bit, right? This phenomena that there is if you don't know what who your users are, what your users need, what their current experience is like, and what their future experience could be like, how can you possibly deliver something that's going to make their life better? And if you're delivering things and you don't know how it makes anybody's life better, why are you doing it? How will you know that you've succeeded? And what's the purpose of being? Well, the purpose is to sell more, but why are people going to buy more if it doesn't make their life better?
Yes.
You can get away with that if you're a monopoly of some sort, but most of us don't work for monopolies of some sort. So, and how many times have you downloaded a new version of something and you're like, what the hell were they thinking? This is worse than what I just had a week ago.
Well, that's always the first experience as you learn the UI and stuff too, but no, it doesn't always get better. I'm also consistently amazed at how dysfunctional organizations are miraculously successful sometimes. I'm like, how is that possible? But sometimes they are, despite everything, right? I'm dying to tell you a little story on how I evangelize research with some of my teams. I think you'll get a kick out of it. Maybe not. Maybe you'll tell me, Kathy, that's very risky. You shouldn't be doing that. They won't take you seriously. Be honest with me, Jared. So one of the things we do is every quarter we have sort of a think poetry slam research readout event where everybody who's done some quantitative or qualitative or data research or secondary research with analysts or whatever, all the research I can get from all those input channels, everyone gets a minute and a half, and they get a slide, and we go through, and each one presents the customer value and the business value of that research, and we go boom, 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 like a poetry slam, one right after the other. And it's been really great to sort of pull back the curtain and let the rest of the organization, see that we're working on these things and we're getting these important insights, we're doing the research, but also it's sort of like good for morale, right? In that way. So our research readout poetry slams have been sort of a little creative way of, getting people looking for that research every quarter and not letting it sit in a cupboard with mothballs on it. It's been pretty successful. Have you ever heard of something like that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. I'm on the right track then.
Yeah. If you really want to do this, do it every week.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I have clients who are, I have one team that I work with that every Monday at 2:00, they have a session that shares something new they've recently found out about customers. And the whole company is invited, and people show up all the time.
Yeah.
One
Love it.
There was this one person who showed up for a whole bunch of them, and nobody knew who this person was. They just kept coming. And so somebody looked them up, and the person worked in accounting. And they're like, why are you coming to these? He says, I find them fascinating. I just look at numbers all day, and I'm looking at, how many sales we have and how many customers we have, and I see the company names go by, but I know nothing about them, and I don't really know about our products. And I come to this, and I'm actually learning what people find valuable, what people find frustrating. I see why a company might want to buy us, you buy our product, why they don't. And it got me thinking about who my customers are, and my customers are various executives in this business. And so I started thinking about how I could make like because apparently he worked on budget stuff, and so it's like every quarter we have to do these budget reports. And so I started thinking about it, and I was listening to the techniques that the research people were using. So I started practicing those techniques on my budget reports and found out that people couldn't read my reports, and I was making them better. And now we have accountants thinking about the experience of using internal accounting tools. And suddenly the company is getting more effective at what it does. And this concept that we have to always be thinking about the experience of the people who use our things, whether they're internal or external, it changes everything. Yeah, and they've been doing this now for years, and the numbers of who attend the weekly meetings, it varies, but it never drops off. It's always about the same, and but it's different people, and people want to watch the recordings, and people every so often they do summaries of like, here are all the things that we saw that have this type of problem, or all the things that we saw that have these opportunities. And people love showing up for those. It's a sort of way to connect the what's happening with the users and the customers at all levels of the organization.
Oh, I love that. We often, and I know other organizations do a weekly customer call and invite everyone from the company to listen or ask questions, seed questions and piggyback research. That's another good way to do it. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Jared. Shall we talk a little bit about UX strategy and what the UX tipping point is?
Sure. So the tipping point is this change that we see in an organization. Any sort of inflection point has a sort of before time and an after time. And what makes it an inflection point is that things are suddenly different when you get from before the inflection point to past the inflection point. And the what we call the UX tipping point is what we named a particular pattern that we saw in a bunch of organizations that are really good at delivering great experiences to their customers. And the tipping point is, before the tipping point, everybody's focused on making sure that the product does what the business needs it to do, that it meets business objectives, it brings in revenue, customers sign up at a certain rate, retentions at a certain rate, whatever your business things are. And that the technology does what the technology is supposed to do, that you have a certain amount of uptime, that the failure rates are low, that the bugs are low. They're those things, they're focusing on those things. And if a product isn't meeting those two things, they'll hold the product back, right? They'll say, wait a second, this isn't ready, we're not going to ship it yet, it's got too many bugs, or it's not fast enough, or it doesn't, customers can't buy this upgrade, so we're not going to ship it yet until they can buy the upgrade, right? So it meets their goals. But if something's wrong with the design, we'll fix it in a future release. Let's just get it out there and we'll fix it later. Maybe we'll get feedback from the customers, right? That's my favorite thing. Oh, let's put it out and see what the customers say. Okay, so what mechanisms will we actually use to see what the customers say? But we haven't thought about that yet. Okay. So you're not really serious about doing that. So that's before the tipping point. After the tipping point, they're still focused on the business. They're still making sure that any given product meets the business needs. They're still making sure that any given product meets the technology needs. But now, if it is not meeting the design needs, they don't ship it, right? The product does not get shipped because it does not meet the definition of a good design, whatever that is. And to get to that point, you have to clearly talk about what a good design is and what your minimum for good design is. When that's not a criteria, anything can be the minimum for good design, which is why Microsoft still exists. But when you you don't have Microsoft listeners, do you?
No, I'm sure I don't.
When you have this notion of minimum quality, you have something that minimum design quality, right? You have to talk about it. You have to be able to express it. You have to be able to instrument it and say, okay, on Thursday, we got it from not good enough to good enough. And we're ready to ship now. And so you have to have all that in place. And that changes the culture. That
Right.
changes the way you think.
I think one of the challenges with moving organizations there is also a shared understanding about what good design is. And it's that constant uphill battle of like, is that the interface design? Is that what the design team's responsible? You know, is it visual design? Are we measuring it based on engagement or drop off rates? Like, how are we measuring it? Like, I think using the word experience with design is something that I really try to do all the time now, just so people don't get into that old habit of thinking that the design decision making is only done by designers and it's only visual design.
Right. I don't talk about design very much. I talk about experience.
Yeah, that's making a huge difference in the industry, Jared.
Yeah. Because experience is what we're referring to, right? So we're thinking in terms of what is an acceptable experience and what is an unacceptable experience.
And how will
You
we
know,
know
you
when we get
think,
there?
right. Some things are very clear, right? If you get on an airplane and the airplane drops out of the sky suddenly, and that's an unacceptable experience. We know that.
Right.
But if you get on an airplane and a flight attendant calls a couple of security people who drags you kicking and screaming off the plane for whatever reason, is that a good experience? Um, if
Do
you
you
get
have
on an
inside
airplane,
information on this? Do you know if this is a good experience or not?
well, at some companies, apparently it's acceptable. Uh,
Oh.
um, if I'm not going to mention United, but there are companies where it's acceptable. The if you get on an airplane and it sits on the runway for 6 hours and they don't let you off and they don't let you out of your seat to pee and they don't give you food and drink, is that a good experience, right? So we can talk about what a bad experience is. And a bad experience is missed expectations and unmet needs.
Yes.
And so, I buy an airplane ticket. I have this expectation that the plane is going to take off and it's going to be comfortable to some level of comfort. And then it's going to land and I'm going to be able to get off, get my bags, and go do my thing. And when those things stop happening, and the funny thing is, that's a very low bar for a company that is in the transportation business. And yet, some companies really struggle at uh, at that level of service delivery. It doesn't take off on time, if at all, and it's not a comfortable ride. And I get to my destination, but they don't let me off the plane because they don't have a gate or something is happening. And then I go and I wait for my bag for an hour, and I don't get to move on with my stuff. I mean, that's sort of minimum entry stakes for a company that claims to be in the travel hospitality business. And so now the question is, where do we draw the line, right? What do we say? Wait a second, this is not acceptable anymore. I recently saw an article where I think it was like the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or somebody. They made a big deal about how they had CEOs sit in middle seats in coach to know what the experience was like. CEOs of
Great.
airlines.
Great.
And then I read the article, and the best they could do was get the CEO to sit in coach while the plane was empty at the gate. They
Oh my
the
gosh.
CEO didn't fly in coach. They didn't sit there on a 6 hour flight with a bunch of other passengers. They
Oh,
didn't eat the food that is served in coach. They didn't do any of the things that a real passenger does. And even then, the CEO was like, yeah, this is a bit tighter than I expected. They were they were surprised by the experience, but they didn't even get close to what a real passenger gets close to.
that's
And that's what I
right.
mean about how can that person enforce a minimum standard quality experience if they're not even connected to that experience at all?
Impossible. Impossible. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jared, this has been such a treat to get to talk with you. I know our I know my listeners and my audience will love to learn more about how they can continue to learn from you and join the community. What do you have going on over at Center right now?
Well, we have our Leaders of Awesomeness community. It's
It's
if
amazing.
you
So
just
much
Google
great
Leaders of
content.
Awesomeness, you'll find it.
Yep, yep. I'll share the link in the speaker notes as
I
well.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And we every week we have an online session that's free to attend. We have all of them recorded. There's an archive of current at the time of the recording, 136 of them.
I've
And
joined a lot of them. I've joined a
yeah,
lot of
I
them
see that.
repeatedly over the years, and I'm always amazed. I'll have learned this back when we did courses with the UX playbook on site in the before days in Chattanooga. I'll recognize some content in these courses on Mondays, and I still get gold nuggets when I join up and listen every week.
Yeah, well, good. I hope they're not uncomfortable
No, I bring my team.
or something.
I've also grown my network a little bit. So some of the other participants in the courses begin to network with each other. And that's been really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. We've grown the community. We've got 47,000 people in the
Oh,
community now,
wow. Wow.
which is amazing. Who knew there were 47,000 UX leaders? But there
From all
are
over the world.
from all over the world. We got people from India and Australia and South Africa and Pakistan, and it's just lovely to talk to these people from all over the world.
It is. It really is. I enjoy the courses too. But you also have bigger intensives where you do a deeper dive. You
Mm-hmm.
can join as an individual or as a team for these uh,
Yep. Yep.
intensives.
Yep.
Some of the titles of those.
We do them publicly. We have one on outcome driven metrics. We have one that we do on strategic UX research. We have one that we do on
Big audacious UX goals.
big goals, and we have one that we do on integrating agile and UX. And we run each of those about once a year. And then we have other programs on UX leadership and other programs on UX strategy for organizations that are ready to make a bigger commitment. And then we do coaching and mentoring, and we work on train the trainer programs for bigger organizations and a variety of things.
It seems like common sense when you participate in the work. And then if you're fortunate enough to be able to go out and apply the learnings right away, it's absolutely a game changer for individual careers and teams. So I will put lots of links in our show notes. I thank you so much. We went a little over time here, Jared. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to share? Any questions?
No, this was absolutely delightful. Thank you very much for encouraging my behavior here.
My pleasure, Jared. Thank you.
Thank you.